I will be repeating his claim. He often talks about the maquiladoras like they were created by NAFTA and they expanded. That wasn't true. The maquiladora program was developed in response to the 1964 cancellation of the U.S. program starting during World War II that had admitted Mexican agricultural workers into the United States for temporary employment. Maquiladoras were supposed to provide an employment alternative in the manufacturing sector for braciers, the agricultural workers who had lost their jobs when the U.S. program ended. After that, they all went back to Mexico, so the maquiladora program was born. After that, according to this narrative, competitive pressures meant that the assembly plants would not be able to locate in Mexico. So where would they have gone? Well, the very first option they would have, they'd ship them off to Asia, where the majority of our manufacturing plants are going now. So they're experiencing a loss there. So the maquiladora program is already losing its steam under NAFTA. For NAFTA losing jobs, it brings jobs into the United States. The greatest opposition to NAFTA and free trade in general comes from the belief that foreign competition hurts U.S. employment. This misconception stems from the fact that while greater beliefs of free trade are often dispersed relatively evenly across the economy, losses tend to be concentrated in a few sectors, such as industry and agriculture. But lost jobs are balanced by other jobs created by more productive uses in the economy. And these ones usually pay more. The U.S. employment rose from 110.8 million in 1993 to 137.6 million in 2007, an increase of 24%. The U.S. unemployment rate averaged 5.1% for the first 13 years after NAFTA was in effect, compared to 7.1 during the 13 years prior to the agreement. Mexico employment is also up. As of 2005, Mexican affiliates of U.S. companies employed nearly 840,000 people who contributed 3.3% of Mexico's GDP. Wages for Mexican workers have grown steadily since the 1994 peso crisis, which is exactly when NAFTA was enacted. And they increase every year since. In addition, Mexican industries that export goods or are located in regions with high limit of foreign investment also pay higher wages. According to Mexico's Secretary of Economy, exporting companies pay salaries 37% higher than those that don't export. After that, NAFTA has also created jobs for American workers by expanding access to U.S. goods and services in Mexican and Canadian markets. In 1996, jobs supported by the export of U.S. goods to Mexico and Canada increased by an estimated 311,000 to 2.3 million from 1993, pre-NAFTA. In addition, export-supported jobs, which are in their higher productivity, export-oriented sectors of the economy, pay 13 to 16% more than the average U.S. wage. And for them taking away jobs, the famous debate between the presidential election of 1993 was there's no evidence of a giant sucking sound from the U.S. economy for jobs from NAFTA. After the passage from NAFTA, in fact, the U.S. economy created millions of new jobs. Civilian employment in the U.S. economy grew from 120.3 million in 1993 to 135.1 million in 2001, increase of 2 million jobs per year. And then after that, employment fell steadily. Real wages have risen up and down income scale. Blame for recent rise in unemployment is due to the recession, high interest rates, energy prices, and the failing stock market, all of which are not NAFTA's fault. And for the environmental aspect of it, NAFTA can implement environmental protection, but they are not allowed to enforce it. They're a treaty. They're not a government. The CEC, which is the Environmental Commission for Environmental Cooperation, which is employed in the U.S., is often, they work with the Border Environment Cooperation Commission, with the DECC, which is Mexico's part. They have infused much needed resources for environmental infrastructure to cash-strapped border communities, promoting sustainable development and for sustainable development and public participation in environmental decision making. The border, where the maquiladoras are usually located, has the Border 11 program, which is a complex of national and binational initiatives aimed at environmental improvements in the border area, and has strengthened binational cooperation regarding environmental enforcement and devised key environmental indicators for sustainable development mutually acceptable to both countries. However, I have to stress again, it is up to the governments of the individual countries to enforce these laws. NAFTA has no constitutional power to enforce any of this. And for investment all going to Mexico in manufacturing, NAFTA did not cause an exodus of manufacturing investment in Mexico. U.S. investment in Mexico did increase after NAFTA along with trade, but the flows were trickle compared to what we invest domestically. In the 8 years after the implementation of NAFTA, from 1994 to 2001, U.S. manufacturing companies invested an average of $2.2 billion a year into Mexico, a fraction of the $200 billion invested in manufacturing each year in the domestic U.S. economy. The small outflow of direct manufacturing investment to Mexico has been overwhelmed by the net inflow of such investment for the rest of the world at an average of $16 billion per year since 1994. So the United States is not solely responsible for the investment in Mexico. So is the entire world. After that, and for the European Union, according to Steve Chapman, critics complain that while exports to Mexico have risen, imports from Mexico have risen even faster. But that's not because we embrace free trade. It's because our economy has been more robust than theirs. The NAFTA agreement was aimed at developing Mexico, and we were supposed to help them. Prosperous consumers buy more goods from both home and abroad than struggling consumers. Absent NAFTA, the trade imbalance with Mexico would not be smaller, it would be bigger.